I know that this is procedural, but if we could just put it on the record, can we put it on the record if it's okay? Okay. No, I know, but louder. Fine.
And my concern, sir, very briefly, and thank you for humoring me for a second, my concern is that to the extent that there is any ambiguity, and there frankly is some ambiguity, I wouldn't want our zoning ordinance to reflect anything that is ambiguous, and I am not asking this body to reconsider it today. I am asking to please have it continue, or rather heard again on second reading on January 24th, so we can clarify the language, address any doubts, and bring it back to you in that fashion.
My question to you is this. For them to take advantage of the inclusionary zoning they have to submit an application.
We haven't even applied the map.
Yes.
Right? And when they submit the application...
My concern, Mr. Chair, is that 10 days from now, barring any vetoes or anything to that extent, you have essentially amended the zoning ordinance in a manner that is at best ambiguous, and I have concerns with that.
Could you define the ambiguity? Which one?
Yes, sir.
Which item is this? Which item? Which item?
12.
That is easy
That's a
12.
whole different agenda, but easy 12.
It is, and Francisco, the question to you is, do you stand by your interpretation?
I absolutely would represent to you what I present to you at the time of the hearing. That said, the language is ambiguous enough, as it has been explained to me by third parties, that I think it merits clarification.
We can clarify the language. If I could, we could clarify the language to make sure your interpretation is clear, because it's your interpretation that earned the vote of that gentleman down there.
That's my
and you were very clear on the dais into what your interpretation means.
Yes,
I am happy to work with anyone who feels this was supposed to be a different way and figure it out. But if your interpretation is clear and it does hold within the language that is there, we can clean it up.
Yeah.
But it's...
Right, just to clarify, because I think the Vice Chairman is saying everything, I asked you several times to make sure that we were clear. This is about the 60%, the 80% and all that, or is it something else?
This is about the AMI.
Okay, the AMI was perfectly clear on the record. We could do any Scrivener's changes that we have to. I'm, at that point...
In good faith, it is clear to me. It wasn't clear to all involved, and in good faith, I frankly think, and my recommendation to you is to continue this item and take it again.
Referring to the county AMI.
I'm sorry?
We were referring to the county AMI, 40%, 80% and 60%. See, it was not...
Again, that's how you read it, that's how you presented it to you. Unfortunately, that is not how it is universally read. In my preference, my marked preference is to avoid ambiguity.
And, oh my goodness. Francisco,
Mr.
I don't know, man, you speak in a language that I don't understand, man. I mean, no, in Spanish, he speaks Castellano.
Right.
Are you talking to me Catalonian or Galician?
I am doing my best to speak in English, sir, and I'll make it clear. The language of this ordinance is read differently by different people, all of them well-informed. That to me,
what people?
well-informed people, and as it is the case, as you often tell me, to the extent that there is, when I say you, I mean you, this body, to the extent that there is ambiguity in the zoning ordinance, we prefer to have it clear. The best way to make that clear is to bring it back to you in a month.
Two things. These well-informed people, do they drink scotch?
I do not
know,
sir.
We'll be drinking something.
That is a good answer.
Yes.
It's the first question, right? And the second question is this. How is there ambiguity with language? Well, let me clarify the question first. Is the language that there is ambiguity in already written? Meaning that is it in the actual document that we've been reading here?
Yes.
Or is the ambiguity in the things that we said on the dates?
In the manner the language that has been presented to you today would be interpreted and applied.
However, made an interpretation here when we were asked at least 3 times to say it even slowly, and you clarified your interpretation of that, and we voted on it, and it is now, that is the will of this body to accept your interpretation. Where you're worried about losing goodwill is on those who interpreted it differently up to that point, and who are either in favor of or against this based on their interpretation of it. I believe we can work on that and fix that. But what we passed was clear, and what you said was clear.
That's correct.
Because you waited so long and you resemble the mayor, I don't know how. I want to give you an opportunity to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know the hour's late, but I do think it's important to make my position clear. And for the record, Mike Llorente, heckler.
You're the culprit.
I'm sorry?
Something good.
No, I'm not the culprit. My name is Mike Llorente, heckler, and we represent the Omni Property Owners Association, and as the name suggests, this is a collection of property owners in the Omni area, which is the sort of targeted area for the T624B transect zone. For many, many months, we have been monitoring this item and engaging in discussions with the city based on an understanding that this mandatory inclusionary zoning requirement, which does not exist anywhere else in Miami-Dade County, was based on workforce housing as defined in the code. That is clear. That is clear. It's been clear in all of my discussions with the city, and it is clear in the legislation that has been presented to this body. We have not registered any objection to the ordinance based on that premise. Changing 140% AMI to 80% AMI is a major, major difference that frankly we cannot support.
That is the purpose.
And I understand
that is the purpose. Otherwise, I wouldn't vote for you.
And I understand and respect that, Commissioner. I have to register my strong concerns, and this process has been traveling through the city. This item has been traveling through the city process for many, many months. I have to register my strong concern. There have been a lot of representations about, the support from the industry. I have to register my strong support, my strong objections and concerns.
The industry is asking for additional density, right?
Commissioner,
the industry asking for additional density, right?
Floor lot ratio. Not density, but capacity.
Capacity, additional capacity.
It's not
if it is asking for additional capacity, it is our power to define the rules of the game. If not, you will not have additional capacity. It's very simple.
I understand that, Commissioner, and I understand and I respect that, Commissioner. My only point is that we have worked with the city over a period of many, many months, and for a radical departure to take place at the very end of discussion on second reading and not have an opportunity to register our strong objection is not correct. You're absolutely correct. It's well within your province to determine what's acceptable and not. But
honestly, I'm sorry, Mr. Llorente. This was discussed
Absolutely.
for a long time on the dais. I don't know where you were
okay.
at that point.
That's okay.
But I think that it is clear what this commission voted on. It is clear. I understand that you've been working through a process, and if it doesn't work, the commission will come back and change it. But right now, it's okay.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
I do believe this is a sincere misunderstanding. I know that I never represented to anyone anything different than what is being presented here today. I will work together with you to make your clients whole in the Omni, the name of the group you represent?
Property Owners Association.
Property Owners Association, who may now be significant allies in the extension of the life of the Omni CRA itself, because it can certainly help make them whole and go deeper into affordability in filling any gaps that maybe have been created by this misunderstanding. But I believe this dais was very sincere in where they were going with this, and then the planning director, he has held this interpretation the whole time. So if anybody had any doubt, they could have asked him, and he would have told them his interpretation as the planning director of this legislation, which his department wrote.
So respectfully, Mr. Vice Chair,
Sam, this dummy.
Respectfully, Commissioner, this is not a misunderstanding. The legislation as written is abundantly clear on what is required and what is not required. I would say that changing that AMI level at this stage is not proper. It's not proper because it doesn't put us on notice of what the city is proffering.
I'm going to analyze that with the planning director. It's too late this evening to really get into the detail and the weeds of what he meant, what you thought he meant. But I am very open to sitting down and analyzing that with you, but I do not want to reverse very successful legislation that happened tonight at this very moment. And I don't know how we would. Even the folks who voted on it aren't here anymore. And so I want to work with you. I want to figure out how we get through this because I want to see the projects come to life. And if it's unfeasible, they won't. We talked about that as well. I don't understand why you didn't oppose during the legislation to clarify the misunderstanding because we talked about it so many times.
No.
It was coming.
No, respectfully, this was a statement that was made at the very end of the discussion. It has not been part of the discussion. It was never represented, certainly not publicly to this body or to anybody else, that the intention, which is not what's reflected in the actual code, but that the intention was to require 80% AMI, which is affordable housing,
right?
Which would
could have even
development.
been done as an amendment at the last moment if we had chosen, but it was done by the interpretation of the planning director, which I'm willing to stand by absolutely. I want to learn and study your interpretation and his interpretation, and we'll do that. We'll get together.
And listen, I will say also that no one has to apply for the A to B.
We don't even have a map.
Right, we don't have a map for it. And so with that being said, my point to you is that if you want to make changes in the future, then we just making those changes.
But this was not a bait and switch. This was not a bait and switch. I do believe there is a sincere misunderstanding between what you all thought was being proposed and what our planning director had intended. And somewhere that communication never happened. I mean, if you had approached him a week ago and he told you a different interpretation,
Commissioner, respectfully, there's never been any discrepancy regarding interpretation, ever, at any point. It has always been clear, and it has always been 140%.
Then someone didn't speak.
There was an inaccurate, I think, well-intentioned, but inaccurate interpretation at the very tail end of second reading that would have a significant negative, adverse material impact on my clients. And my point is that you can't go through an entire legislative process and then at the very, very end...
That's exactly what the state of Florida does. That's exactly what the state of Florida does every single legislative session at the very end.
So I respectfully,
If we need to amend, we will amend. But at this point, I think we have legislation on the books. And I believe the intention was clear of the body. So I think that's all we can do for tonight.
We will certainly follow up and meet with all parties involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.